So good evening, everyone. Welcome to another online session. I'm very excited to welcome you to this very important topic about research engagement in language teacher development. So we will get started in just a few moments. So before we do that, just a quick reminder for the audience that the main mission of Everyone Academy is to encourage online collaboration and to increase it and to bring educators, teachers, and researchers together. So as I said, tonight's topic is extremely important. It is about research engagement and language teacher development. So there are three main areas here. We have engagement, we have language teachers, and professional development. We have with us 𝐞𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐞𝐬 from Norway, and I'm very honored to meet him tonight and to learn from his experiences in writing about this topic. So welcome, Kenan. Welcome to Everyone Academy.
Hi, Aziz. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. Thank you for inviting me to talk about that. It's as you said, research engagement is a very interesting topic for teachers. Sometimes it's very empowering. Sometimes it's also very challenging for teachers because of many different reasons. Because teachers' main job is teaching, but research is sometimes considered as burden, but it's also seen as an empowering professional development activity. That is one of the main advantages of having research as a professional development. And there are many studies as well about how research helps teachers to develop. That's the key point. So what happens when teachers do research, how they develop themselves, how they develop their teaching, how they develop their learners as well. And today, actually, I'm going to talk about 5 different levels of research engagement. So how teachers can do research and what are the unique outcomes of each level. Yeah. Okay, do you want to say something or I should continue?
No, you just get started, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And as I said, I mean, research as an activity, as a professional development activity, has not had a huge background in teacher development. But in recent years, we have done many studies, and there are many more teachers dealing with research as a professional development activity. And today I'll be talking about that. So in general, we can look into traditional professional development where teachers are knowledge recipients. They are based on expert knowledge, how others are telling them to teach, or they are just replicating theories in their classroom. So they consume existing knowledge rather than they create the knowledge that they need for the classroom. But in research-driven professional development, we see that teachers change their roles in actually generating knowledge that is relevant for them to teach better. And in research-driven PD, they also seek evidence to support their teaching or to support the change that they're going to make in their teaching. So they become more inquirers and critical self-reflectors or critical reflectors on the teaching. So in general, we look at professional development in recent years as bottom-up and top-down. So in traditional PD, we see more top-down, externally supported professional development provided by others to the teachers. But in research-driven PD, we see more bottom-up PD because the teachers are encouraged to initiate their own research process where they can understand their teaching better and more, where they can, understand their learners, where they can understand their materials, where they can have knowledge that will enable them to change their teaching for better. So this is the general understanding, and research is actually opening new spaces for creating more teacher-based, teacher-driven professional development in general. And but what is the role of research? I sometimes see that research is, of course, teachers and students participate in research, but they are usually exploited for their knowledge. Whereas in research that they do with their research, with their students, they explore together. So students and teachers usually are part of research that researchers do. But in our understanding in recent teacher education field, we see that teachers and students should do research themselves and should understand their learning and teaching process in general. And when teachers and students engage in research, that kind of research functions as a medium of interaction, which means they try to understand each other. And then the research initiates kind of critical reflection between teachers and students. So when teachers initiate research and when they include students in the research, so this creates a mutual interaction where they become more aware of who their teachers are, who students are. So this is the key point. And when we ask teachers to do research, they also create a non-exclusive environment where, you know, they investigate their doubts, their questions, and then they start to understand more and develop more insights into teaching. And research also helps them nurture problem posing, I would say, and the mutual understanding is maximized in different ways. That also leads to a kind of reciprocity in understanding challenges, actually, because, you know, it's inevitable that teachers have challenges and students have challenges when they are learning, and these challenges should be reciprocally understood by them. And research is the site or is the activity where both people, both teachers and students, can come together and investigate these challenges. Research also mediates the critical and meaningful thinking in the classroom when people are looking for new responses, new answers to their questions, or trying to understand the reasons for their challenges. So these are all interesting benefits of research when research is conducted by teachers and students in the classroom, because this altogether also provides them with space for self-regulating their learning and their teaching, because research helps them generate knowledge which is useful and relevant for them to understand each other, as we said. And this helps them, if they have the knowledge, then they can regulate, they self-regulate how they are gonna learn and teach in the future and in the upcoming courses. And in general, when teachers and students conduct research, we see that they investigate pedagogical issues in the classroom. So this is the general issue, but we generally say that they need to identify these issues together. When teachers decide to investigate a problem or an issue in the classroom, they usually make a decision themselves, and students may not participate in that research because this may not be their concern. So what we suggest often is that teachers need to initiate some research by negotiating the topic or the issues with students. So first of all, if they discuss what is the problematic issue in the classroom, what is challenging in the classroom, and then decide to investigate a particular topic, then students' participation will be fully understood or fully ensured in the research. And in that research, as we said, they also engage in knowledge seeking together. They do not I mean, the topic of research is not just concern of the teacher, so they try to address the challenge together. And they both focus on understanding rather than solving a problem, because solving a problem may not be easy, even if it could be practical. But what it could be more useful, more relevant, is to understand together the issue and then trying to take some actions to address it, to improve it. And the research that is done by teachers and students can also lead to new practical and contextual challenges or insights, because usually when people teach, they do not have the knowledge about the context itself. So by doing the research, they also understand the context, which includes the school context, which includes materials, which includes learners profile, which includes why they learn English and how they want to learn. These could provide many practical understandings as a result of research. That is why we always say that initiate your own research, but include your students to be able to understand better. But one of the general understanding of research by teachers and students is also the improvement in the interaction between teachers and students, because when people understand each other better, that improves interaction as well. And the improvement in their instructional practices, how they teach, is also going to be changed or adapted, because they have more evidence about how students learn, or how they want to teach, or how they actually teach, and how students find their own teaching, their teachers' teaching. So these are all important issues to address. Over the last decade, actually, we've been thinking about what is research engagement. One of the things that we've been working on now, actually, how we can categorize these engagement levels. So these are the 5 levels that we have come up with. One of them is teachers can engage in research by reading, but academic research. So this is actually the first level. By saying first level, I'm going to explain a bit what I mean, because the 5 is the highest and more complex level of research engagement. So to me, there are 5 ways of engaging in research. The lowest level is reading academic research, and we're going to discuss why this is the lowest level. The second level is implementing theory in practice. So rather than reading general academic research, as in research 1.0, there is also the second level, research 2.0, where people find the theory and then they try to implement it in the classroom. This could be like one of the motivational theories, like how students can get motivated. And then they get this theory and maybe the principles, practical principles, and then they implement what this theory is saying. So this is another level of research engagement, because reading about research, a particular research, and trying to find out how they can implement it is another level. But this is a bit higher level, because there is an implementation. There is a link, connection between theory and practice. But in the first one, teachers usually read academic research without really thinking how they can put it into practice. This is for developing their understandings, their knowledge. The third level, which is a bit high, more complex or more advanced than research 2.0, is theorizing practice. So at that level, there is no theory or there is no academic research, but teachers initiate kind of a reflective practice, for example. So they reflect on their practices, they look how they are teaching, they try to understand what is going on in the classroom, and then they try to come up with, okay, how do I teach? How do I theorize my teaching? So at level of 3.0, actually, they try to develop deeper understanding of how they are teaching. So this is also about developing a self or personal theory of how I am teaching. So reflection is helping them develop that personal theory, personal and practical theory of teaching. So the key practice or key engagement is deeper and critical reflection on the practice. At the 4th level, this is the topic of today, actually. So how teachers do research. So if teachers do research, what I mean is collecting data, generating evidence, posing questions and trying to address them with data, with evidence from students, from the classroom, then this is a bit more complex for teachers. And research 5.0 is the most complex one. Is okay, teachers do research, but how they can facilitate learner research in the classroom. So this is the most complex level, most advanced level. So reading academic research is actually, which I will be showing now. It's to learn theoretical basis of teaching. Okay, what is teaching? So the academic research might help them develop some theoretical knowledge, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are going to implement it. We usually read research and we like them, and then implicitly they might influence our teaching, but it is the connection is never clear. In the second one, actually, when teachers implement a theory in practice, they try to teach theory oriented. So they align their teaching with a major theory or with a relevant theory, so that they can see if the theory is implemented in the classroom. So they are still bound to external knowledge. They are not generating anything, but at least they are improving their practices in relation to a theory. At the third level, theorizing practice, it is more about understanding one's own teachings, how I can understand my teaching, and then how can I come up with a personal theory of how I am teaching, which is mainly done by reflection, written or verbal, we can say. I mean, deeper critical reflection. And doing research is carried out to improve teaching, as we said. And this teaching improvement in teaching actually is a result of the research planned, organized, conducted, and assessed actually with or without students. Sometimes teachers do research on students, not with them. That's also another issue. Maybe in doing research, we can recharacterize, regroup how research engagement is happening in the classroom. But the most complex one is how to make learning research-oriented. So how can we engage our students in doing research, but also learn? So research-oriented learning is the highest level of actually research engagement for teachers. It's not about teachers themselves doing research. They are also engaging their learners. But I don't clearly mean that these teachers may not be part of the research. They will definitely be part of the research. But it is more about how can we integrate inquiry? How can we integrate research as part of learning rather than teaching? Usually the first 4 levels are about how teachers do research at different levels, but now how they can facilitate research in the classroom. So this is also kind of, if people can do research themselves to improve their teaching, then they can learn how to facilitate their learners' engagement in research. That is the key point. So when we actually do, reading kind of research engagement by reading academic research, this is more about reading research that is published in, let's say, as we said in the beginning, motivation. So you read studies done on motivation in different contexts, international contexts, or you can read practical research. What I mean practical research, there have been a number of books actually where teachers' studies published. So teachers write their classroom research, their teacher research or action research. We can ask teachers to read practical research as well, rather than reading academic research, which is like conceptually challenging and complex to read for teachers. It's like, it's not easily understood, or it's not comprehensible. But sometimes there are more practical research published in magazines, published in books, written by teachers, that would be maybe more easily understood, we can say. Teachers might read them. And in the second level, I mean, teachers actually develop their practices, as I said, based on a theory, which is relevant to the topic that they want to understand, like autonomy, for example. So if they want to develop teachers' autonomy, they read research about autonomy and they try to find a theory of autonomy, and then they They just try to implement it in the classroom just to make students more autonomous. And as we said, theorizing practice is the third level, and at this level, teachers construct their own personal theory, I would say. But in doing research, the fourth level, it's more about data-driven research, where teachers really organize, design a piece of research where they need to understand some practical issues, whatever they think it is challenging for them to learn and teach. And at the last level, so the researchers are learners, so we help learners to become researchers. That is the most complex one. Yeah. And the process actually is the teachers, when they read academic research, they try to understand the academic knowledge in general. So how this knowledge can help them is not clear, because most of academic research does not provide actually practical or practicalities for teachers to understand. They provide implications, but these implications are just helping different stakeholders in schools or in the field develop some kind of practical understanding, but that doesn't necessarily mean the teachers can get it easily. So academic knowledge is not easily translatable into practical input for teachers to get. So that there are a number of articles on that as well recently, as far as I know. But it's the second level, actually, when they implement theory in practice, they develop a lot of awareness into their practice, because they are integrating a theoretical understanding somehow, as much as there is no clear definition of how we can implement a theory into practice, and teachers' ability to understand the theory and how this theory can look like in the practice is their actually own ability or own capacity. This is also not clear in literature, I would say. And in theorizing practice, they develop their own practical knowledge. When I say PK is practical knowledge, so they develop kind of practical knowledge because they are theorizing their practice in general. And while doing research, they develop different deeper understandings into the practical knowledge that they need, actually. So at the fourth level, research 4.0, they understand how they are teaching. So research helps them understand how they are teaching, how they can teach better as well, because they also gain insights into learners' profile, learners' expectations, learners' needs, as learners are participating in the research and provide really useful and relevant information for teachers to consider and to adapt their teaching. But at the fifth level, research 5.0, I think they use a lot of research activities to help students to learn. So this is actually the key point, where learners can understand or can go beyond traditional activities in the classroom, and they inquire about particular issues. So students mainly doing research to understand the topic or content that they are trying to learn. I mean, there is no, actually, I'm not going to give many examples here, but when we say research activity, we mainly think that learners can go and collect evidence, collect data, interview with others, observe each other, observe the teacher. So they mainly do research activities like observation and interview. And then while doing all these research-based activities, they develop language skills. So that is the key point, actually. And in our book with one of my colleagues in Turkey, we published by Springer, actually, the Macmillan, that book could provide a number of research activities that is helping you to connect research and practice, I would say. You can have a look at that from Macmillan, yeah. And I will be a bit talking about why I say reading academic research is at the first level, it's at the lowest level. Although it is very challenging and hard. I don't mean that it's not complex. It is very complex, but in terms of its effect on the teacher, it is the lowest level. So I'm looking at the complexity because it's not helping the teacher to kind of improve their practices so easily. But of course, there might be teachers who might say, no, I'm reading research and I'm changing my practice. That is also possible. But what is mainly reported in that regard is that academic research is one of the least empowering activities, because teachers are not dealing or generating anything. They are just trying to learn the academic understandings, which is not addressing them as well. That's the key point. So we do not write academic research for teachers. We are writing it to publish academic research, scientific knowledge. That is why, since the knowledge that is created in academic research not intended for teachers, they may less likely understand what academic research is saying, because although it is talking about acquisition, it's talking about teaching, it's talking about learning, the genre, the jargon they are using is actually different. So what I thought is that reading academic research is an engagement in research, which is actually engagement with research. This is the phrase that is used when people read research, engagement with research. Whereas in the other levels, engagement in research, where teachers actually do research. So engagement in and engagement with is the key difference here. But why this is the lowest level? As I said, the teachers have difficulty in understanding academic research, and they develop kind of teacher knowledge. They develop that, but this is without direct influence on their learners and on their teaching as well. I mean, it's not clear. We're actually doing something, doing research about that, and how teachers use academic knowledge, academic research in their teaching. This is an area that needs to be actually investigated by cases in different countries, I would say. But of course, reading academic research helps them feel knowledgeable about teaching. Say they develop some kind of knowledge, and this can indirectly help them teach better, or this can indirectly help them understand teaching and learning. But usually, since I said these articles are not written for teachers, they may not easily understand it. So what I would suggest for reading research is that they need to read research done for them, or done to address teachers directly. So if the research is talking to them, it is more easily comprehensible and understandable. So teachers can get most benefit from a research that is written for them. This includes the use of language as well. I mean, in academic language, sometimes when I talk to teachers, they say, I really don't understand many of the words in academic research, too high level. So it is conceptually and linguistically hard for them. So what I suggest, if teachers want to read research, they should choose research written for them. Because in some journals or in some books, they say, this is for teachers, this is not for researchers. This article, this book chapter, or this book or this journal is for teachers. Easy to understand, practical knowledge is there. So this can be translated into kind of practical knowledge by these teachers who read them, and it can influence teaching and learning. So that is the key point here. And the second level, as we have said, implementing theory into practice is usually, this is different from research. This in that theory implementation, I suggest, or I mean, teachers get a theory and then they try to implement it in their classroom. in general. Of course, this is a bit better because they try to understand a kind of theory, which could be really hard to understand, but at least they try to find what is relevant for their practice. And this can like help them connect theory to practice, I say. You know, it's not about how connecting theory and practice, but it is connecting theory to their practices. Okay, how I can implement this theory in my classroom. One of the motivational theories, maybe, as I said. So you can go and understand if you want to, and then try to find out practical insights from the theory, although theoretical knowledge is also really hard. But I know of or connecting theory to practice also encourages teachers to experiment with ideas. So they start experimenting, and then this experimentation is a process of thinking, trying, reflection, assessing, and it engages them cognitively, and they start thinking. So this triggers kind of a rethinking, revisiting of assumptions and biases or understandings. That is why I call it experimentation, because they're trying out if theory can help them teach better, or if their teaching is related to a kind of theory, or so, but at least they construct a new practice, or they construct new practical knowledge by connecting theoretical understandings to practical context. And just during that process, they can gain a number of benefits, actually. One of them is developing new ways of teaching, new ways of learning. So this is I like, you know, pedagogy is a site of experimentation. We never prescribe anyone to teach in a particular way, because that does not mean much. So we can actually help teachers to let's say, experiment things and find their own way by doing this level of research, I would say. And at the third level, we can see that, you know, when people try to understand their practice, so this time they are not implementing anything. Okay, this is my practice. How am I teaching? How can I summarize how I am teaching? So when I say theorizing, it's not developing a theory for all, it's developing a personal theory. It means explaining or describing one's own teaching practice through a kind of theoretical basis. So this is how I am teaching. So they deconstruct their practices, and then they come up with a summary of how they teach in kind of the pattern of teaching in general. And this time, on you know, on the contrary of research 2.0, where they are connecting theory to practice, they are connecting practice to theory here. Maybe it's not a connection, so they construct a personal theory here. And they seek and create a theoretical basis of their teaching. This is also very interesting. And they also understand their own teaching, so how they are teaching and how they can improve it over time. And this is where actually teachers start to become a constructor of their knowledge. They discover new knowledge, and then this is where research engagement becomes more dynamic, more influential, or more teacher-driven. I like when teachers actually construct their own knowledge, when they try to understand their teaching, and then they identify the knowledge gaps they need or the practical gaps they have, so that they can improve their teaching. So this is kind of a researching process, which is very important for teachers to develop. And research 4.0 is this time they are doing research. Doing research is different from the first, second, and third level, because in the first three, they are not collecting or constructing any data. But at 4.0, they work with data. As opposed to first and second level, where they are trying to use theory to understand, to inform their teaching. And even at the third level, they try to theorize their teaching, which is at least a kind of research. But this time, the clear difference is that they use evidence, they seek evidence, they collect data, or they construct data with or on students. That is the key point. And to be organizing kind of a systematic research in the classroom is really challenging. But there are many teachers. I appreciate them, and they do a lot of research. They try to use questionnaire surveys. They observe their students and themselves, or they ask others to observe them and give feedback, and then they turn this into research. Or sometimes they interview with their students as part of their teaching. So they ask their students how they want to learn. This is an activity, for example. Okay, how do you want to learn? Let's discuss. And then they get this, they use this as data to build their understandings on. And then this helps them develop their teaching. So doing research is mainly different from the other levels and more complex, because you need to collect data and analyze it and interpret it for better teaching, for improving your teaching. But there are different versions of doing that as well. I mean, there is this treatment-based, intervention-based action research. And there is also this teacher research. You ask a question and you try to answer that, actually. There is exploratory research where you try to understand some of the puzzles that you have, like, why do my students not engage, for example, in learning or in doing homework? So you try to understand these things, but ultimately you collect data to understand this. But in the first three levels, we do not collect any data. But we work with external theory, external knowledge, and try to understand our teaching, but connected to a theory at least, or our own theory. At this level, we see that teachers understand learners' process of learning better because they have evidence. They will talk to them, they will collect evidence and then analyze it. And then they will also be aware of contextual features, especially through students' lens. The students will provide a number of evidence or a number of insights for teachers to consider. And then they will also at the same time engage their learners in critical thinking and problem solving, because research activities in the classroom, when teachers are conducting research, is sometimes so immersive for students. So they are not just addressing or responding to a questionnaire, but they provide systematic data over time. They write, for example, diaries, or they write reflections, or they discuss and record their voice. And all these are about how they are engaged in learning. So research inevitably engages learners in the learning process, even though it is actually sometimes superficial. For in some research, there are many research designs that teachers are having where learners are really immersed into all levels of knowledge. They are providing knowledge about how they are learning and teaching. They are providing feedback for the teacher, or they are also suggesting different ways of practices, different ways of teaching and learning. So this is more about how you are designing your research, how you are enacting or orienting your students in the class for your research. One of the things I have said recently is how teachers can merge teaching and research issues. So I'm not saying that research should be externally done in the classroom. I'm saying that turn teaching into research activities, or turn research into teaching activities. That is the key point. For example, if you're teaching students conversational ability, let's say, you want them to have conversations with people, then why not they do some interviews with external people? Like, okay, create a video, digital media where you are interviewing with blah, blah, and then transcribe it, bring it to the classroom, tell us about your interview. So this is a simple research activity where they can develop conversational skills. So how to talk to someone, for example. If you want them to do some kind of survey, if they develop the survey as a collaborative activity, they learn how to write grammatical sentences, which could be precise, accurate. So what I'm saying here, engage students in research activities, but the ultimate language purpose and output should be your agenda. So what do you want them to learn? Because in research activities, this is also the key. But this is one level of doing research, which I will be talking in a minute as well. So this research also facilitates reflection and collaboration in the classroom in different ways, depending on the design that you have. And ultimately, when you learn how students think and what they think, you can challenge your assumptions. You can revisit your assumptions, and then you can say, I've never thought about it. I've never understood my students because they are telling me this, but I always thought that blah, blah, blah. So the key point is the evidence and the data that students are providing can also surprise you, and then can also help you get rid of your assumptions and biases, because the students' perspectives and the students' data is reality. But ultimately, when properly conducted, teachers actually, or research that teachers do, can help them develop their learning and teaching in different ways. Yeah, and the last level, facilitating learner research, is really an interesting. That is actually hardly achieved as far as I can see. Of course, there are many instances when people work with master's students or PhD students. I have always asked my students to do research. That is fine. I have also done some research with pre-service teachers, actually, and but that wasn't published or turned into a paper. But I was always asking students to collect data, to analyze it, and then tell us something that they come up with. That is the key point. So facilitating learner research is possible at the PhD level, because you can always, when you're working with PhD students in your courses, you can ask them to do that. Even at a master's degree, you can ask them to do research as part of the courses that they get. But in the pre-service level or language learning level, let's say in language classrooms, although it could be designed, many teachers actually do not have that. But there is this inquiry-based engagements. This is what I understood in many course books. So they engage students into some kind of thinking, critical thinking, but it is not data-led. That is the difference, actually. So when we facilitate as language teachers, let's say, learner research, this is where teachers and learners collaborate, and then they develop a very meaningful interaction about things that matter to both. So they investigate the topic and then they come up with. But the ultimate aim here is not that the students will come up with, a kind of research results that is positive or negative. That is not the main idea. The main idea is the process of engaging in research. And while engaged, they need to learn language. So how can we make that possible? As I said a moment ago, if we ask them to, let's say, to do research as part of learning, so, or if teachers can combine research activities with teaching activities, or vice versa, then actually they can develop that understanding. So it's not about reading a passage in the book or listening to something, but it is more about creating listening themselves, or creating writing themselves, or selecting them, and then trying to understand it together, and then developing kind of a research activity or an analysis activity on whatever they are learning. We can also help learners collect data to understand actually the issues. Usually in content-based instruction, we see that there are a number of projects where teachers are asking students to do research about or to do experimentation and then present the findings. So content-based lessons where English is also integrated is potentially very useful for such engagement. But we can always, as I said, help students develop some kind of research plans, work with data, understand language with data. One of the key things, for example, helping teachers to work with corpus or bringing some data for students to analyze so that they can learn the language, vocabulary, and grammar in different levels. But if students actually engage in research, this can lead to openness and transparency. So they become more open and transparent in terms of the way they are learning the language. They can become more aware of what they don't know, or they can become more aware of the gaps that they have while learning. So it's actually kind of developing or broadening their understandings and perspectives when they are dealing with some kind of data, either given to them or they collect themselves by interviewing others, trying to understand. In one of the pre-service education program, we in a course, we ask the students to, for example, go and find teachers, let's say. They are also students in higher education, though. They are not language learners, but this can be replicated. We ask them to go and find people and then interview. These people are teachers, for example, on a particular topic. And then we ask them to read something. We ask them to interview, and then we ask them to interpret, and we ask them to collaborate and reflect on the theory, on the knowledge, on the data they collect from others, and then come up with something. So at the end of the day, we saw that they learned in a more complex way. They learned about research and how it looks in practice by interviewing teachers who are teaching. It was about bilingual teaching, and they found teachers teaching and working in a bilingual program, and they learned a number of practical things from the teacher, and then they merge all these to the data or to the research that they read as well. So there was kind of a piece of research that they do, because there is data that they are analyzing. And as we said, if you ask them to collaborate, the learners can develop, their relationships with each other, because they are discussing critically about these issues. And more importantly, when we guide students to become a researcher, then they develop a different role. So they are not recipient of knowledge from the teacher, but they are the creator of that knowledge. So they can go out, find data, analyze it, and then try to find knowledge that they need to learn themselves. So they make this learner research is making them more discoverer of knowledge or explorers of knowledge, rather than receiving knowledge from the teacher. That is the ultimate goal, I think, because they become more critical and they become more like, okay, I can find out what I need to learn with minimal support or minimal intervention by the teacher. And I can consult my teacher when I need help. And they can actually, when they do research, they can present it, they can share it, they can discuss on it. So these are also very important. And as we said, so learning does not, teaching becomes learning, by the way. So it's kind of self-teaching. This is what research can do to learners. I can learn, I can discover and explore what I need to learn. So this is, as I said, transforming learning process, because learners are learning themselves rather than expecting the teacher to teach them fully. So I don't mean that teachers have no role in that, but teachers' role is minimized, and teachers open space for students to think, to access knowledge, to test their knowledge, to share, to try to understand how much they're learning, how they're learning, and then just come up with the knowledge. Of course, this takes time. It's not easy, because in the traditional teaching, I mean, you can say something in let's say 2-3 minutes, you can just transmit knowledge. Whereas if you do that for where teachers, students are actually trying to understand it, it might take 40 minutes, because you have to be patient about how much time they put and invest actually in learning. So research classes takes longer time, I must say. So you need to be careful about that and design your research-based teaching and learning in that direction. So it's not about 1 or 2 minutes of transmitting knowledge. It might take 1 or 2 hours, or at least 1 or 2 hours plus some classroom, some activities beyond classroom or after the classroom, whatever. So you can actually plan extra time for research-based classes. It goes slowly. It is not a quick solution. It is a powerful solution in the long run, but its main understanding, its main purpose is the research makes learners more critical. They learn more, they think more, and they understand more in different ways. Okay, that is the general understanding in such research. Yeah, I mean, in general, when we look at the student's role in what happens in research-rich classrooms. Research-rich classroom means teachers and learners are research active. They both engage in research in different ways. We can see that students are co-researchers, or they are the researchers in the classroom. Teachers and students engage in reflection, and they share their reflections. They become more and more critical of teaching and learning, and they engage in collaboration. They engage in discussion. So research rich means both teachers and students do research in different and multiple ways. And in many ways, we have seen that there is more engagement in research classrooms on the part of the students. Students become more engaged in learning. They also reported that they felt energized, empowered, motivated, because they can talk about these unspoken learning related issues and pedagogical challenges. These are the key points that we need to have in mind. And in general, if in research-rich classrooms, we see that this is the level 4 and 5, actually, from my perspective. And such classrooms actually are more democratic, and research is feasible in these classrooms. So teachers believe that they can do research, and they believe that they can facilitate learners' research as well. So research is not something that is at the monopoly of academics, but it is something that teachers can also engage and manage. It also liberates students and teachers, because research agenda or research-based classrooms are a bit messy. So they feel that they are free to think in a particular way without confinement to the teacher's way of teaching and learning, because they can also identify issues, and they can also learn in the way they want. And more importantly, actually, research in the classroom helps teachers and learners raise their voices. I mean, in the school at a micro level, but if they publish it, if they share it in conferences or in webinars or in different events, dissemination events, then this can also help them raise their voices, and they represent themselves as a learner or as a student as well. So in many ways, these teachers actually have a number of pedagogical advantages when they engage in research. So finally, I just put some activities here. So to develop various pedagogical understandings, teachers can engage in research at 2.0, 3.0, or 4.0, and even actually 5.0. So different pedagogical understandings. But if they want to experiment various ways of teaching, then maybe this is more about level 4, where they are conducting research as well. And teachers actually develop new roles as researchers and analyzer. Again, they become 4.0, because for them to become researcher, fully researcher at level 4, they need to collect data and organize research, as I said. And at 4.4 and 4.0, 5.0, they construct their identities as well. And they also influence their students' identity for better. So if teachers become researcher, what I have observed is that they also try to make their learners researchers in different ways. And exploring new strategies of engaging students. This requires facilitating learner research, where students are engaging in research. And while students actually are engaged in research, they can observe the strategies that they are following to be able to learn better. So this is level 5 as well. And in order to develop more contextualized teaching, I think facilitating learner research is really key, because while students are engaged in research, we can identify a number of issues that will help us teach better, that will inform our instruction in the future. In one of the research, actually, where I asked my MA students to engage students in research, taking the control of teaching and learning in the classroom, they found that students wanted to focus on speaking, and they wanted to use digital media for speaking. Many of them said, I have never thought about it. I have just tried to teach in my own way. By stepping back and then observing my students, listening to what they say, how they are designing the lesson, how they're redesigning the lesson actually, what kind of skills they want to learn, what kind of activities they design. I just came to become more aware of what my students want. And this is actually a student-oriented practice, which is also informing teachers' future teaching. It was actually a bit of research activity, because students collaborated, students reflected, and then they generated something. The data was in the group discussions, because they were also analyzing and accordingly developing new learning and teaching practices in the classroom. That was the important aspect of that class, actually. Sorry. And the last actually benefit or way of how teachers learn through research is where teachers and learners develop agency and autonomy over teaching and learning. So, okay, there are textbooks, there are methodologies, there are methods, but we can find our own way, you know, in the midst of all these external knowledge, external methodologies. And from that perspective, I have seen that teachers doing research with their students developed a number of areas of agency, and they felt a more sense of autonomy over, in order to, you know, regulate their teaching and learning. So it's not about becoming independent, but it is becoming interdependent. It's becoming how to learn when and from whom. That was the key point, because research, learning through research, requires multiple other things. Some externals or students in the classroom where you collect data, and also, you know, how this research is being facilitated by a mentor, for example. So at this level, developing agency and autonomy is actually evident at research 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. So today, actually, what I wanted to do is to show you that research engagement is not just doing research. There are other levels of doing research. But of course, each level has its own advantages and opportunities for teachers, which is what I've been addressing. But the important message here is, which is actually missing in the literature, is the last one. So how to facilitate learner research and why, and what are the learning outcomes of such courses or such learner facilitation of research. That is the key message today. And just looking at research 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 and 5.0, we can see different levels, different purposes of doing research. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. There are so many interesting points and issues raised in your talk or presentation. But before moving to the comments about your talk, there are some quick questions we would like to ask.
Yeah.
Do you think that the main issue here is that there is a lack of collaboration between researchers and practitioners? And you kind of mentioned this earlier a little bit when you said that academic papers don't target teachers. They mainly write to get published in academic journals. Do you think this is an issue? I know that you advocate putting teachers and learners' voices in papers, and that's exactly what you mentioned with your colleague.
Yeah.
That you advocate this approach of putting teachers and learner voices. But what do you think about this issue?
I mean, well, usually when I write papers, I also think, okay, what are the teachers and students going to learn from this research? But it is hard to create space for such practical implications sometimes for some journals. Of course, we put, but the difficulty is the language issue. When you publish for journals, you have to write it with some conventions, academic conventions, and high level of language. And even the editors sometimes ask for native speaker editing or native speaker proofreading to make it more and more idiomatic, more and more high level of academic genre or academic jargon in the text. That is one thing, but there are some studies where teachers and learners, or many studies in our field, include teachers and learners as objects of the study. What I mean, they participate in research. The data come from learners and teachers. But the data, after we get the data, we use it in a different way to analyze, to categorize. And I'm not sure if these teachers who participate in that research can read it later or will have access to that research. Maybe some researchers share the research to these people and ask them to read it after it is published. But this is also not a solution. There was a kind of some research where they are discussing this. How can we like explore this gap between academic research, teachers and learners? But this is not fully addressed so far. We need to find ways of generating a new genre of writing and within the academia where teachers can be encouraged to read, because it is providing practical knowledge for them to understand. We usually work with teachers, we collect data, but we never include them in our research in general. What I have done in recent years with IETFL research SIG and with some other editors, like the first editors were Richard Smith from Warwick, Mark Wyatt from Abu Dhabi, and Burns from Australia, Gary Barkhuizen from New Zealand, and also Judith Hanks from Leeds. These were the editors that work with me when I was developing these books, where teachers published chapters, but they were doing some research and writing about it as part of this process. So we have created a number of edited books which are open access in research SIG, IETFL Research Special Interest Group. You can go online and find these open access books where teachers are writing, actually. So we were the editors of these chapters. We helped them to write their chapters and publish. That was I think you can find 4 or 5 books there. There was one also with Aslı Salam from Turkey and now Norway. We also do teacher stories, an outcome of our classroom-based research EVO initiative, online initiative. So what I'm saying is we need to open spaces for teachers to write themselves, and we need to help them become the researcher or writer of their research as well. But also, as I said, I don't see it as a bridge, actually. Like there is a always mentioned divide between research and practice, or academicians and teachers. But I think we need to help teachers to explore these links. So where are the links that are relevant for each? The collaboration between academics and teachers should not be about collecting data from teachers, but maybe engaging them in the research a bit more and making them close collaborators or co-authors at some point if it is a qualitative research. I don't mean that, you know, hundreds of people can be the co-author, but if you're doing some, at least academics can choose and pick one teacher, and then they can work on a paper together just to help teachers to do that. That could be one way of doing. Of course, maybe there are many such studies out, but they are not so common, I would say.
Yes, this will lead us to talk about writing itself. We had a discussion with Krashen earlier, and he advocated the fact that researchers should write short, simple papers, not those papers full of jargon, and also publish them in open access journals like the one you mentioned.
Aziz, are you disconnected?
Okay, I said this will lead us to talk about writing itself. Do you think that teachers or people don't read long papers full of jargon, academic jargon, and the papers have to be short, to the point? They don't have to mention too much details, too much. They don't have to be complicated.
Yeah, what I was saying is the most of academic papers do not address teachers. They are written for publication at academic levels to address academics and researchers and high-level educators. But what I mean is there needs to be a genre that is that includes papers or a style of writing, practical but insightful, but they should talk to the teachers. They should not talk to the academia in general. And this is possible if the teachers write the research as a teacher. And in the books that I was mentioning include a number of research studies done by teachers, written by them, and edited by us, actually reviewed and edited by us. So it was actually a colleague, for example. We had a piece of research about that as well. We asked teachers to read this research and then how they feel. And they said, this is very interesting. We can understand what is being said when our colleague is writing. But if I read academic research, it is something, of course, there is something there, but I can't It doesn't make sense to me. That is
Yes.
the key point. If you, this is also published by me and my colleague Simon Mumford, for Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching Journal. So reading research paper on reading research and how teachers reacted to reading teacher research rather than academic research. Yeah.
So I love the idea that you said that we should turn teaching into a research activity and a research activity into teaching. This is really awesome and great.
Yes.
One thing, one little comment about, you said that students' perspective and data are reality, and teachers need to get rid of their assumptions and biases. Why students' perspective and data are reality?
Why students' perspective is needed, you mean?
And data. Why students' perspective and data are reality? And teachers should get off their assumptions and biases.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we take many things for granted while we are teaching. We assume that students will be intending or will intend to respond. We assume that students understand. We assume that students learn in a particular way. But when we talk to them, we see that the reality is not that. So we have never explored the reality. We sometimes just start teaching without talking to our teachers. We design the course, we go to the classroom, we start teaching, but we never ask our students how they want to learn and what they want to learn. So when you ask them, you really get very surprising responses. And then you start to, let's say, get rid of your assumptions. Okay, I shouldn't assume that the learners will like it. The learners will learn that way. That was the thing, actually. So it awakens us actually a bit when we read what students are telling about how they're learning or how we are teaching. That was the thing that I wanted to mean.
That's great. You also mentioned research and experimentation, and you used those terms interchangeably.
Yeah.
Which one which one do you think is more powerful and successful in this regard?
Yeah, of course, when I said research, I meant the teachers need to work with data. They should collect, construct data, analyze it, interpret it, and try to understand. But when I said experimentation, it's kind of, there is something that a theory, for example, or theory suggests that teachers need to teach in that way or in this way, let's say. And then you can get this idea and experiment it in the class. It's like the classroom is an experimentation area. You just experiment that and then reflect on it and then see if it works. This is not data-based. This is theory oriented teaching. So there is a difference. But when you say research, when we say teachers do experimentation, we mean that they get something and try it in the classroom. It's just very limited. When we say teachers do research, we mean that they construct data, they analyze it, they interpret it, so they go through some research stages. It's different. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. That was really a great session. One little comment about research engagement. Does it cover both engagement in teacher research, that is by doing it, as well as engagement with research by reading and using it, or just one area?
Yeah, I mean, we usually say research engagement, and then we try to recategorize the subcategories. Like we can say research engagement is the umbrella term, and you can categorize it or you can extend it differently. So reading and doing research is different. So research engagement, engagement with research and in research are two polarized activity that you can find in literature. Yeah.
Okay, so Kenan, thank you so much. Do you have any final comments or
Oh yeah,
before we close the session?
Yeah, thank you very much actually for inviting me to talk about this. We need to talk about these issues actually, how teachers can develop themselves and how teachers can develop their students. by using research activities at different levels, as I have grouped actually as research 1.0, research 5.0. So teachers, I think, need to understand different levels of research and can implement all these in the classrooms. They can try out and see how they are developing their creativity, their criticality, and their language teaching skills, I must say. Yeah.
So this session will definitely promote a research culture among teachers and educators,
Yeah.
and we really learned a lot from it. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aziz. Thank you.
Thank you, and see you later.
See you. Bye.
Bye.